allegiance of a new member. Announcements by presiding officer. In just about a week, the students of this country will take the secondary education assessment examination. And therefore, on behalf of the honorable members and on my own, I am extending best wishes to all the children across the island. We believe in you and we are praying for your success. Children and parents, I want you to remember that at the end of the day, it is said that there is success and there's learning. Regardless of the outcome, look at it in a positive light. Remember that education is not just about taking examinations, but more so about the commitment to learning, that is an essential tool for consistently making the right and reasonable choices, which is a building block of strong democracies and effective parliaments. Let me also take this opportunity to extend greetings on the upcoming Spiritual Baptist Liberation Day, and also to welcome those in the public gallery, visitors to the public gallery, including the members of youth councils of schools across the island. Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions, papers.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I have the privilege of tabling the Tobago House of Assembly's monthly budget report as at the end of February 2019.
Presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission, Select Committees, Code of Conduct, questions to secretaries, request for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries, personal explanations, introduction to bills, motions relating to the business or sitting of the Assembly and moved by a secretary or assistant secretary, public business, executive council business, private business, motion. Minority Leader.
Madam Presiding Officer, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the people of Tobago. A wonderful people, an illustrious people, a people with an indomitable will. I also take this opportunity to reach across the corridor and say hello to my colleague, member for Black Rock, Wim Spring Garden. Indeed, I must say I salute him today. On one thing only. After that, it will be political licks. I think he has made good on his promise of providing us with an adequate office, one that does not require an elevator, one that could satisfy the needs of even those who are differently able, those on crutches, those on wheelchair. And I say that's the way we want to go, because the Minority Leader's office is an office that welcomes all. I also want to say thanks to him for also depoliticizing the Minority Leader's office by moving it, by the contemplation, and I believe the subsequent move, to have it move from under the office of the Chief Secretary or the Executive Council to that high and mighty plane, neutral plane, called the Assembly Legislature. So I say I salute you because I recognize you are moving in the right direction. But if I say to you, we have only 1 year, 9 months, and a few days in that office. For that, we are happy. I move on, Madam Presiding Officer, without much further ado, to say that it is with great pride, again, I stand here to put before this honorable House a motion that lends itself to that which we have been speaking about for all times. The right for Tobago people or populace to decide which direction it wants to go. We are talking self-determination. It is a plug in that direction. The motion reads, whereas the development of Tobago's indigenous culture, rural expression is critical to the socio-economic development of the island, and whereas the development of these cultural expressions is also critical to the maintaining the identity of Tobago within the context of a sometimes complementary national culture, and at other times a competing larger triniculture. And whereas the annual pre-Lent National Carnival celebrations form part of both our indigenous and national culture, and whereas over the years, participation in some of the island's carnival celebration has arguably been extremely poor, be it resolved that the Tobago House of Assembly allow communities that host carnival activities to find ways to reinvent the Tobago Carnival celebration and to properly manage the budgeted resources for the festival so as to attract a larger participation. Be it further resolved that the Tobago House of Assembly over the next 6 months rethink a formally held Executive Council decision that Tobago will not have a second carnival and will instead meet with the various stakeholders, including those that now hold the Tobago Fest, to ascertain feasibility and subsequent action. I intend not to be long with this motion today, but I can go long based on the opposition I receive from the other side. But I tell by the number of speakers they have presented to speak that this is a fait accompli. They agree with the motion. And I want to say kudos to you all for being magnanimous. That's a favorite word from that side across there. Being big. Accepting the fact that if we as Tobagonians, we as the THA, we are now seeking greater autonomy, the right to self-determination. It means that our culture, our artistry, in whatever form it presents itself, must be given that opportunity to resemble Tobago and to become Tobago. We must own the thing because we have invented it by our own thoughts, aspirations, efforts, etc. Madam Presiding Officer, I will go back to and I'm being disturbed by the other side. I don't know, they weren't talking before, but all of a sudden I give them a few compliments and they get excited. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, for coming to my aid. I'm tempted to go longer now. The year was 1780, when the French colonials intervened. Madam Presiding Officer, is that the behavior I have to contend with?
Secretary of Finance, could you please give way to the mover of the motion to complete? You will have your turn at the end.
You will have your turn, but not today. Tobago was introduced to Carnival in 1780 by the French upper class, who created Carnival with a series of festivities that would have started after the Christmas season. It wasn't for the small man, but it was nevertheless a period of expression. After 1833, the abolition of slavery, the slaves, the working class, the people who were now regarded as Tobagonians, so to speak, took to the streets and they began to celebrate this carnival period in a way that was never celebrated, because now it was not limited to the upper class, the bourgeois class, but it came down to the grassroots, man on the streets. And I want us to mark that point. That was Tobago. They began to sing calypso in your own way about things that was critically important to them, and they couched the language in a manner that sometimes disguised the true intent of their message, introducing the plural meaning to kaiso. Then in 1889, Tobago was forced to join Trinidad, and they became a ward of Trinidad. Indeed, that took on its own benefits, but it had its own drawbacks. One of it was that we would begin to lose our culture, our real identity, over the ensuing years because of Big Sister Trinidad almost foisting upon Tobago its own culture, its own direction, and it will determine for us the type of financing that was available for a number of activities on the island. Carnival, nonetheless, has evolved from the 1780s, the 1830s, after slavery was abolished, to now being something that is world-class in nature. Something that people travel all over the world to experience. There are a number of carnival that takes place around the same time, the pre-Lenten season. And I happened to see carnival like that in Brazil, and recently France. And one thing I recognize, it's a time when tourists travel to look at carnival and engage in plain mass. It brings me to a point, Madam Presiding Officer. In 2012, that was the year, we have had the then Minister of Culture, Mr. Winston Gypsy Peters. Mark that name, because life sometimes is a cycle. Sometimes it's a circle. It goes around one way and come and hits you the other way. He suggested that Tobago should have its own carnival. Not to take away from the Trinidad and Tobago carnival, but to accentuate Tobago's individuality, Tobago creativeness, and Tobago's ability to earn money and attract visitors on its own. Start to say, the People's National Movement executive then, led by former Chief Secretary of London, they refused to take the opportunity for Tobago to determine its own pathway culturally on such an important event. They refuse. 2019, Mr. Gypsy Winston Peters has found himself now playing a pivotal role in Carnival again. And the discussion has arisen again, whereby Tobago should hold its own Carnival. And as if we on this side, the minority side, have taken a rather urgent position, as your people will see, a stitch in time to save 9 position, we have brought this bill to the table, having just completed Carnival 2019, to say to this honorable house, it is something worth considering. Based on the mathematical formula, I will say to you, it is believed that Tobago would have made about $4 million from Carnival. It is believed. Based on the formula I'm seeing here. Madam Presiding Officer, our Carnival is something that belongs to us. It is the freedom of expression. Just as the people in Pyramid Hill, Marval, they were the ones who came out with the Blue Devil, they are best known for Blue Devil. Just as the people in Grenada, best known for Jab Jab, even though it's played everywhere, it's famous for Jab Jab. Just as the people in Port of Spain, they are famous for Pretty Mass, because even though San Fernando has Pretty Mass, Port of Spain has the prettiest of masses, so to speak. We believe that Tobago has something to offer, but we cannot offer it if people are not involved. And this is one of the main points we wish to leave with our colleagues on the other side. In order for Carnival to take that stage of prominence or to attract even persons from Tobago, we have to give it a space, a decent space, and allow persons who are interested to participate in inventing it. I recall the words of Tobago Festival Executive Chairman, Mr. George Leacock, in a Facebook post on March 2nd, 2019. And I quote, "4 more days of pretending to like Carnival because everybody else doing it. Push, push, push. You can make it." Loaded. Those words are loaded by the chairman. Pretending to like Carnival. Push, push, push. It's a clear indication of a lack of enthusiasm when it comes to planning Tobago Carnival. We want to juxtaposition that against the Heritage Festival, for which there is no lack of motivation. Why? Because the communities are heavily involved in planning it. I'm quite aware that the district of the Assemblyman Watson Duke has been sabotaged with Carnival this year. Imagine Carnival came, ended. We are now looking at Easter, and the prizes for that Windward Carnival is yet to be given out. Abuse of power, abuse of authority, furthering the demise, I would say, of the Carnival spirit that once existed in that Windward district. People now are saying, what sense play mass? Why play Carnival? Why engage in Carnival again? You play, you win, why not award you the prize? What could be taking so long? This is the thing that kills our Carnival. It's also noted that even the prizes between 2012 and 2016 were basically constant. But with the new PNM administration, the prices went down in the East. They went down. It's ridiculous. It's uninviting. And I would say it is unpalatable to even think about first prize and second prize and third prize in some of those competitions. Today, Madam Presiding Officer, we wish to challenge the PNM executive. So let's have more discussion on having participation within those communities where carnival are to be hosted. We wish to say to them, the time has come for us to kill this segregation and separation of our people by having Juve in Roxborough, Scarborough, and then Crown Point. This time that we have one big Juve. And I'm suggesting Roxborough. One big Juve in Roxborough. They could compete, they could put other things on Scarborough and put something in Crown Point if they want to play mass on there. But they are diluting the thing to a place where it is no longer tasty. People, but no spectators. More people than spectators, I see. I also wish to say that this is an opportunity to brainstorm using the wider international community. Because I told you, Carnival does not get less in places like Rio de Janeiro, Venice, and other places where they keep Carnival. It's improved every year. It's something people look forward for. And they don't have calypso music. They don't have soca. What they have is consistency. What they have is proper planning. What they have is their own culture that they put forward. It's time that the THA engage the private sector, those persons who are planning Tobago Fest, in the planning of our carnival. It's time that all mass bands, all Calypsonians, would become part of that stakeholders meeting as we forge our way forward for a better carnival. It's time to stop fighting Tuku. It's time to stop fighting Tuku. It's time to stop fighting the mass man and embrace everybody. This is our culture. It's our thing. And so in closing, as I said, I wouldn't be long. I wish to say, be it resolved that the Tobago House of Assembly allow communities to host carnival activities, to find ways to reinvent the Tobago Carnival celebration, and to properly manage the budgeted resources for the festival so as to attract the larger participation. Be it further resolved that the Tobago House of Assembly, over the next 6 months, rethink a formally held executive council decision that Tobago will not have a second carnival and will instead meet with the various stakeholders, including those that now hold Tobago Fest, to ascertain the feasibility and subsequent action. Madam Presiding Officer, I therefore thank you as I place this motion on the table.
Honorable members, the question proposed. Whereas the development of Tobago's indigenous cultural expressions is critical for the socio-economic development of the island, and whereas the development of these cultural expressions It's also critical for maintaining the identity of Tobago within the context of a sometimes complementary national culture and at other times a competing larger Trini culture. And whereas the annual pre-Lent National Carnival celebrations forms part of both our indigenous and national culture, and whereas over the years participation in some of the island's carnival celebrations has arguably been extremely poor, be it resolved that the Tobago House of Assembly allow communities that host carnival activities to find ways to reinvent the Tobago Carnival celebrations and to properly manage the budgeted resources for the festival so as to attract a larger participation. Be it further resolved that the Tobago House of Assembly over the next 6 months rethink a formally held Executive Council decision that Tobago will not have a second carnival and will instead meet with various stakeholders, including those that now hold the Tobago Fest, to ascertain feasibility and subsequent actions. Secretary of Tourism Culture, Councillor Nadine Stewart-Phillips.
I thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to contribute to yet another debate. I intend to jump right into the motion as I do not intend to be very long, as the motion does not require much. However, Madam Presiding Officer, there are some things that must be placed on record. And I want to start, Madam Presiding Officer, because it's kind of difficult coming in after the minority leader. And more so difficult because this was his motion. So I was listening and waiting for the facts that would support his motion as piloted. I was looking forward to, at least on this occasion, sensible banter, at least today. I was looking forward to that today. But, Madam Presiding Officer, I guess you can never expect too much from the representative for Roxborough Dallaford, who, in my view, thinks that the only way to get your point across is shouting and screaming and rambling with no real information. So you pilot a motion, you present your motion, but in your opening salvo, there is no facts. You do not set the tone for the debate. So I will attempt to do that now, Madam Presiding Officer. And I wish to state from the onset, I heard the minority leader purporting that we are supporting the motion. But let me state that we will not support the motion as it is currently written and will propose the suitable amendment at the end of my discourse. Now, I want to start with the motion as it is outlined. The fourth whereas reads, over the years, participation in some of the island's carnival celebrations have been arguably poor. And I cannot and would not agree with the words and extremely poor, Madam Presiding Officer. I would say, however, that the lower levels of participation could be attributed to a number of factors, mainly the lack of buy-in from primary stakeholders, probably insufficient injections, or the perception that carnival promotes immoral behavior. Because we cannot, even in considering a second carnival and the stakeholders, and I heard the minority leader mentioning the stakeholders as the mass people and as the Calypsonians, but what about the Christian community? And so, Madam Presiding Officer, we must understand that due to the small population size that is Tobago and the fact that communities are getting much more engaged in carnival, what we have really seen is a geographic shift in participation from the central location in Scarborough to other communities such as Roxborough Juve. We have the Crown Point Juve as well. So the interest, as it were in the past, in the Scarborough Juve may not still be there for some persons. We have the Calder Hall Juve as well, that occurs on Carnival Tuesday morning, which attracts a large turnout of participants. And these have presented more options for participation, and the communities of Crown Point and Calder Hall on their own have been able to reinvent carnival celebrations, and the minority leader is asking for us to give communities the opportunity to reinvent. But here we have the community of Calder Hall and Crown Point that have already gone ahead and reinvented. And the minority leader seems to also be contradictory in his presentation, because I'm pretty sure I heard the minority leader saying, Madam Presiding Officer, take it from all the communities and carry it in Roxborough. But you are asking us to give communities the opportunity to reinvent. So I guess in his wrap-up, he could probably sort that out. Madam Presiding Officer, Carnival, as you are aware, is a major aspect of our culture, since it epitomizes our creations, our dance, our music, our pageantry, and exuberant celebrations. Might I add, Madam Presiding Officer, that Trinidad's Carnival has become the signature event on the country's cultural calendar, with Tobago attracting persons seeking a slower pace type of festivities, as well as those seeking a vacation experience. What is required for us to differentiate, Madam Presiding Officer, our carnival product offering is by creating a unique selling point, whereby we preserve the traditional aspects of our carnival and market that to the world and, of course, to the new generation. Because although we are discussing a second carnival, we have to also consider ways in which we can improve our pre-Lent national carnival as well. And this talk of Tobago Carnival, Madam Presiding Officer, is definitely not a new one. As a matter of fact, I am aware of a strategic planning report completed in 2009 and a committee report of 2011. Now, the minority leader indicated that Winston Gypsy Peters in 2012 started this conversation of a Tobago Carnival. But if there was a report in 2011, it means that that discussion started here in Tobago and not by Mr. Winston Gypsy Peters, as the minority leader indicated. And Madam Presiding Officer, if I can just read into the record some of the recommendations of the strategic planning report of 2009. It recommended a new vision and a set of core values aimed at reinvigorating the festival. The mission calls for all stakeholders to invest in, to advocate for, and develop the carnival arts and creativity so that they impact positively on the cultural, social, and economic well-being of all communities in Tobago. The report further suggested core values to support this new mission: community development, celebration of Tobago's distinctive culture, and edutainment for all. Madam Presiding Officer, it is clear that in considering a second carnival, there must be greater input and greater collaboration from the private sector. The development of carnivals on the islands are largely led and largely funded by private sector and the key carnival industry players. And so if, as the Tobago House of Assembly, we plant the seed, then the strengthening of the system, of the stem, it must be twofold. The branches, the leaves, and the fruits will only come to bear 100% effort from the stakeholders in the private and creative sectors. Madam Presiding Officer, as outlined in the second Carnival report of 2011, the committee recommended that in order for a second carnival to be successful, the following characteristics must be desirable. The event must be new and must reflect the unique story and flavor of Tobago. Mass, pan, calypso, and soca should comprise the major elements of this second carnival or event. The event must be of high quality, providing greater economic momentum for film-induced tourism and other niches in the tourism markets. Competition should be kept to a minimum, but should include an international soca competition as a drawing card for regional and international performers and audiences, an international carnival queen competition, a steel band competition with special prizes for the best Tobago bands playing in the various categories, a parade of bands competition. Bands from outside of Tobago must partner with and register through Tobago-based mass bands, ensuring that at least some significant aspects of mass production take place at the Tobago-based mass camps using a significant number of local hires. Madam Presiding Officer, this committee further recommended that the theme of mass productions by all mass bands, it must be Tobago-centric, depicting aspects of Tobago's natural and cultural heritage. It should also be noted, Madam Presiding Officer, and I'm still reading into the record recommendations from the report of 2009, there is a possibility of the following benefits to be derived: economic development for private and state-owned business entities and citizens of Tobago, capacity building benefits, especially in the areas of festival management and cultural products and performances, a networking opportunity for mass bands and festival service providers, opportunity to showcase Tobago to the world and brand the Tobago Carnival product, stronger positioning of Tobago as a premier cultural tourism destination with a Caribbean region. But, Madam Presiding Officer, even as we consider the benefits, we must also pay attention to the weaknesses or the cons that were also identified in the strategic report of 2009. On the socio-cultural end, Madam Presiding Officer, dominant religious influences discourage participation. The perception that Carnival promotes immoral behavior amongst the youth. Some of these same strong social pressures against Carnival-related activity cause many Tobagonians to go to Trinidad for Carnival, where they can free up without fear. On the product development side, Madam Presiding Officer, not sufficient investment in the Carnival product as it relates to event management and promotion. The area of security, there's a growing sense that Carnival encourages fighting and violence among participants. So, Madam Presiding Officer, the question of whether Tobago should have a second Carnival requires extensive consultation. And as I indicated initially, we are not only speaking about the mass people, those that are directly involved, because we have to speak to those that are not involved but are affected as well. Madam Presiding Officer, one of the major questions to be considered as part of the consultation, what is the main aim or objective behind having a second Carnival? What format would this Carnival take? Are we saying that a second Carnival is needed to aid in boosting our tourism thrust, thereby developing a product which will increase visitor arrivals and economic activity? Or are we saying that we need a second Carnival because every other island is doing it? Madam Presiding Officer, we definitely agree that the development of Tobago's indigenous and cultural expressions are critical for the socio-economic development of the island. And therefore, this mission would be a call for all to invest in, advocate for, and develop Carnival arts and creativity to ensure that it positively impacts the cultural, social, and economic well-being of Tobago. We want the discussion around a second Carnival to be seen as the creation of a product. The reality is, as we know, the world has slowly moved away from white sandy beaches. The world is now looking for activity in order to travel. Today's tourist travels for a purpose, and this is why we see niches like sports, food, ecotourism taking root all over the world, and more recently here in Tobago. So as part of the stakeholder engagement, Madam Presiding Officer, we envisage at the end whatever is developed and implemented, it must be a celebration that can compete on an international scale. We need a product that will speak for itself, of high quality and of course, predictability. The area surrounding the discussion should be to expand and improve our local talent in Tobago for our work to become popular and showcased to the world. Madam Presiding Officer, the synergies of this product must be deepened to ensure there is an improved offering to visitors, which might include all-inclusive packages where hoteliers can offer ticket for events, mass costumes, and accommodation as one part of a deal. And this, Madam Presiding Officer, is one of the main reasons why we are saying that that extensive stakeholder input and discussions are critical, as well as the buy-in from the business community. So, Madam Presiding Officer, we are open to this conversation. As a matter of fact, we endeavor to move swiftly to ensure the necessary consultations occur and put all the necessary mechanisms in place to leverage this opportunity once there is consensus at the end of the discussion, because the discussion may start with the stakeholders on Carnival, but in the end, it may not be called Carnival. It may be called a music festival. It may be called something else. So we are very open going into this conversation. So, Madam Presiding Officer, in closing, I propose the following amendments. In the second whereas, delete sometimes complementary and at other times a competing larger triniculture. The new whereas will read, and whereas the development of these cultural expressions is also critical for maintaining the identity of Tobago within the context of a national culture. The third whereas, Madam Presiding Officer, delete the letter S at the end of forms. The new whereas will read, and whereas the annual pre-Lent National Carnival celebrations form part of both our indigenous and national culture. Madam Presiding Officer, we are deleting the entire sentence in the fourth whereas, and the new whereas will now read, and whereas the time is now propitious to consider once again the idea of a second Tobago Carnival. We are deleting the entire sentence at be it resolved, and the new be it resolved will read, be it resolved that this House supports the collaborative effort between the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation and the Division of Finance and the Economy to engage a wide cross-section of stakeholders in the Tobago community to ascertain the feasibility of a second carnival and the subsequent actions to be taken. We further propose, Madam Presiding Officer, that the be it further resolved as proposed by the minority leader be deleted. Madam Presiding Officer, I thank you and I beg to move.
Councillor Dr. Faith B. Israel. Could you please, just a minute, please, let me. You made a request?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I rise to second the amendments, and I reserve my right to speak at a later time in the debate.
Councillor Dr. Faith B. Israel.
Good day, Madam Presiding Officer. Good day to the members of the House, and a special good day to the visitors in our gallery. I'm particularly pleased to see our students with us here today. Madam Presiding Officer, I'm going to ask you to allow me to be 100% honest with you and with the people of Tobago. Um, Honest today because I am beginning to feel like some of the people who we represent have been saying to me for quite some time. I'm beginning to feel like those people that whenever good, really good, or even great contributions are made to the Tobago House of Assembly, they are never really taken on board and they are never really incorporated. And because of that, Madam Presiding Officer, it's beginning to be, and I'll be honest, a little difficult sitting and debating at these sessions because I'm beginning, like so many others, to feel like if we are continually wasting our time, wasting the people's time, wasting the Assembly's time and the resources that is needed to have these debates happen. This is for several reasons, Madam Presiding Officer, and it's because we see that the kind of debate that the world expects, the kind of meaningful discussion that is expected at this House seems to not really happen. We have an opportunity to sit and critically look at important issues that are related to Tobago's development, and we spend quite a bit of time not really doing that, but just almost playing house. It's as if we're, this Tobago House of Assembly, a dollhouse that we are just playing. The second reason is because, Madam Presiding Officer, there is also a feeling that the research, the hard work, the dedication, all of those things that are really necessary to bring true and meaningful discussions before this House is wasted. The same way people outside feel that when they say something is working or it is not working for this reason or for that reason or the other, they are being ignored. What I am expressing here is something that, let me step back. One of the things we always do, or those of us on the minority side, is whenever we have to speak here, we post the motions online and ask individuals, what do you think about this? Because we understand that when we speak, it is on behalf of those people out there, not necessarily those who are sitting among us around the shoehorn, but those out there. And what we are getting is a level of frustration that I did not expect. And I am honestly feeling it today. I am going to therefore ask all of us, for us to sit and critically review what we do here, how we behave here, how we speak here, because what we do here really does affect the lives of the people around us. Madam Presiding Officer, and going back specifically to the motion, what we are asking for, in fact, what we are begging for, is for this Executive Council to pay very special attention to the first resolution of the motion. And that is a request to really allow the communities that have been participating in this thing, that are the ones who we expect to develop the mass, and the ones who we expect to be a part of the pan sides, and the one who we expect to, do those things, for us to really give them an ear, a serious ear, to help us who are sitting around this shoehorn, to help us reinvent this thing called Tobago Carnival. Because yes, what we are seeing is that there has been a shift in certain places. And in those areas, it really has been because the members on the ground, the people on the ground, the business communities, the whoever, they have been really taking it on their own shoulders to do something different. But because we are the Tobago House of Assembly, and because we are the ones who primarily fund many of those activities, we should pay special attention to them and listen to them. And let me be clear, Madam Presiding Officer. By no means am I saying that we should have these token consultation meetings. I think enough of us have been at many of those, and we knew after, we knew as we were walking in that it may have really just been a waste of time, but we still tried, we're still committed, we still want to do it. We know as we are sitting there listening and talking and interacting that it may still be a waste of time. We know after we've left that it's still a waste of time, because the next time the Tobago House of Assembly does whatever it is we were just talking about, they still did not take into consideration the very good ideas that were laid on the table at those meetings. Madam Presiding Officer, what we are asking for is this concept that is known as participatory democracy. It is a kind of democracy, Madam Presiding Officer, that allows all of the citizens to know deep within their hearts that they are involved at every step when it comes to making a decision, when it comes to managing how that decision is implemented, when it comes to reviewing that decision after it has been implemented. Madam Presiding Officer, we no longer want, and when I say we, I'm speaking on behalf of those out there, no longer want a Tobago where we just elect the politician and we are unable to participate in how our lives are then run until next election, where we get an opportunity to either keep them because it wasn't too bad or vote them out. Tobago has gotten to the point where we no longer want to wait 4 or 5 years for our voices to be heard. Madam Presiding Officer, that is what we are asking for here. Now, Madam Presiding Officer, one of the things that we've been speaking about, another festival that Tobago continually speaks about, is, again, the upcoming Jazz Festival. We understand that a comprehensive evaluation of it was done, but it seems like the Executive Council, not the people of Tobago, paid for that evaluation. Because we are again moving into another jazz festival, and we, those of us who pay that and those of us who do these things, have no idea what that report said. And it is ironic, Madam Presiding Officer, that the councillor who spoke before me would again make mention of another set of reports from 2009 and 2011 pertaining to this same issue, that it seems like the PNM-led Executive Council are the only people who've seen these reports. Now, granted, if we had an opportunity, if Tobago had an opportunity to review and to look at and to critically analyze, maybe we would not need to sit here and have this discussion right now. So may I ask, Madam Councillor, through you, Madam Presiding Officer, that a copy of those two reports, 2009 and 2011, and whatever strategic plan came out of it is made public, because I am sure that information can help the people who tried the thing with Tobago Fest last year and those who are again trying it with Tobago Fest this year again. This information should not be secret information. These reports were not done with money that you took out of your pocket for it to be done. These were done with taxpayers' money. And we have the right to know what is in those reports. And it is sad that today, 2019, we are talking about reports that were done in 2009 and 2011 and 2009. And I cannot say whether any of the recommendations in those reports have been implemented, whether it is the second carnival or a regular carnival or anything like that. What are we doing? We are just here, again, wasting time. Madam Presiding Officer, give me an opportunity to explain why this kind of participation is so important for all of us. So important for those of us who are leading, but also important for those who we lead. When we actively engage communities in problem solving, because that is what we are doing, we allow them to shift their paradigm from one of just identifying problems to one where they actively identify solutions. Therefore, the communities will not spend all the time lambasting us as leaders and saying we don't know what we're doing and this wrong and that so, because they have been actively involved in finding the solution. Madam Presiding Officer, again, when communities are actively engaged in the development of their lives, they are also willing and able to participate in activities that they normally would complain about or they normally would make fuss about. For example, every year we hear about the budgets decreasing for everything. And every time you hear about the budgets decreasing, you hear Tuco quarreling, you hear Mass people quarreling, you hear Pan people quarreling, you hear everybody quarreling. Now, if we really actively engage these individuals, when the program is being developed, even when the budget is being made, they are the ones who will be on the ground and they would know going into it that we have a budget cut of 5%, 10%, 50% or whatever. But they were at the table when that cut is made. Therefore, they will not be outside cussing you because it's the first time they heard about the cut happening. We need to be conscious, Madam Presiding Officer, that what we are dealing with is a situation where people will complain, people will think of worst-case scenarios, people will continue saying negative things when they do not have sufficient information. And if they are at the table, when the decisions are being made, they will have the necessary information. Madam Presiding Officer, probably the most important reason for allowing this carnival, this rethinking of our carnival, and possibly the establishment, a real re-establishment of a second carnival, if we so agree, why this is important and why we can use this as an example of how we practice that participatory democracy is, again, the fact that Tobago is at the cusp of receiving even more autonomy to rule ourselves, to do what we need to do. What I've noticed though, Madam Presiding Officer, is that when you chat with people on the ground, even about this Tobago autonomy, what you see is a little bit of fear and a little bit of hesitation, because there is a genuine concern that we have been given a little bit of autonomy, actually a good bit of autonomy all of these years, and there is kind of the feeling that we ain't do nothing with it. And if we have done nothing with it, what we're doing with more. And yes, I will repeat on record that that will be thanks to the PNM, who has been managing Tobago for the last 18 years. So what they are seeing, what they are expressing, is that frustration that we've been using a whole set of money, the 40 or 45 or how much billion dollars it is, and we, those of us on the ground, cannot really see, cannot really show the kind of development that we had expected, given that all of that money was being spent. So they are skeptical. We need to remind those people, Madam Presiding Officer, and again, we can use this rethinking of Carnival and rethinking of our festivals, a way to do it, that even though we have been governing ourselves for the last however long, that the people of Tobago have really not been actively involved in that process. And that is what we are trying to allow them to do. I know it, and I'm sure all of you know it, and you know it, Madam Presiding Officer. Tobagonians bright. We excel at everything we are given an opportunity to do. There are those who are on the ground who have excellent ideas, ideas that I would never think about because that is not my field. And what we are doing is asking you to just give up a little bit of power, release the grip, and allow those who are out there who have the know-how, who have the experience, who have gone to other places and seen it, and then can come back and tweak it or come back and completely revolutionize it so that it is Tobago. That is what we are asking you to allow those of us who sit or who do not sit in that little room known as Executive Council to help all of us develop. That's what we are asking for, Madam Presiding Officer, an opportunity for the island, for those who are really involved to brainstorm, to see how can we do this? How can we do this better? Madam Presiding Officer, we have a very rich history on this island. We have a history that is being told kinda during our Heritage Festival, but even during that festival, it is really told one way and one way only, or it really only talks about a particular era. This is an opportunity, again, to open up our minds, to think about how we could, think about this differently, how we could identify different eras of Tobago's history to highlight within our festivals. We have an opportunity to look at our folklores and possibly create our Tobago-specific carnival characters. Characters that you've never seen anywhere else in the world, not in Trinidad, not in Brazil, nowhere else. But we just need to give us the opportunity to do that. What we are asking for is for us to really just stop and think for a little bit. Stop and brainstorm for a little bit and allow those of us outside of this room an opportunity to really shape how we do things, how we do these festivals in Tobago. And yes, if and when we do that and we do it correctly, we will indeed be attracting thousands more people to the island, because we do know that we need more people on the island to continue to develop our economy. Madam Presiding Officer, let's just think about it for a second, and these are just my ideas. And I said, I am not a carnival person, I don't really know much about these things, but just having an opportunity to think about it. Trinidad has a big carnival. I mean, Trinidad Carnival, it is big, it is bright, it is loud, it is rah-rah. That is the bacchanal. That is why people go to Trinidad for Carnival. This is an opportunity for us in Tobago to sit and really critically think about whether it does make sense. Does it really, 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 really make sense to try to compete with that? I don't know the answer, but does it really make sense? Or can we in Tobago use the opportunity to rebrand Tobago during Carnival time as the camp capital of the world? So all of the people, you know, the church people in Trinidad who may not want to be a part of the revelry can come to Tobago for that weekend and those 2 days and whatever, and we use that opportunity at that time to get those people. That is a source that we have not really tapped into. This is an opportunity to critically sit and think about that. This is an opportunity to really critically sit and review the economics of marketing Tobago that way around Carnival and not necessarily trying to compete with what's happening in Trinidad. And Madam Presiding Officer, if we do agree that we do want a Tobago Carnival that may not necessarily be around the same time, and we do already have this tradition of Tobago Fest being in September, then we can really, really sit down and work through what that means for us. We may not, again, try to do the pretty mass and those things that we know Trinidad Carnival for, Port of Spain Carnival for. But we can create, I don't know, a Nancy Mass, wherever, whatever, our own thing, our own thing. We have a rich history, and I know, Madam Presiding Officer, this is something that you also enjoy, having the Modern Mud, where we, for the very first time, are seeing brightly colored, vibrantly, brightly colored mud. Maybe our Tobago Fest can focus a big chunk of it on having all of us in that brightly colored mud. I don't know. It is a suggestion. And this is what we need people to be sitting around thinking about. Actively thinking about what works best for us. Now, Madam Presiding Officer, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to wrap up by asking us, and particularly asking the Executive Council, to do two things this afternoon. To really listen and critically review the arguments that are made here. Because this is one that really shouldn't be a partisan issue. This was one that really shouldn't be one that you vote based on party lines because that is what you're supposed to do. This is one that we could agree on because it is good for Tobago. The second thing I would ask, through you, Madam Presiding Officer of the Executive Council, is that we don't do what we frequently do whenever the minority brings a motion. Which is, and I guess we've already passed the first step of it, watering it down by doing an amendment. And then you pass your watered down, amended version. And then, and this is the part that annoys me and frustrates me to the core, because after you water it down and you set up your committee or you do whatever, nothing happens after that. And by the way, Madam Presiding Officer, I would like to put on record, what date is today, the 26th, 28th of March 2019. This is what, our 24th sitting. We in the minority have raised several motions. It was watered down and committees should have been set up. We are still waiting for information on the committee that deals with transportation, because we had suggested that we create this Tobago Transportation Authority that would manage all transportation. We are still waiting to see what that will do, how that will work. And we are also still waiting for the committee that should have been set up to walk Tobago through this entire Tobago Autonomy Self-Governance Bill thing that's happening in Trinidad, in the Parliament. And that committee, again, has not been set up. Now, it's possible, and please correct me if I am wrong, that they were set up and I just don't know. That is quite possible. So if that is what happened, please let me know. But what we are doing here, and what we have spent the last 2 years doing, Madam Presiding Officer, is just coming and sitting around this shoe, and saying that we will do these things, saying that we will set up these committees, saying that we will whatever, and nothing gets done. True. Madam Presiding Officer, it seems like this PNM-led Executive Council is bent on doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. Right. Or maybe I am wrong, Madam Presiding Officer, that this PNM-led Executive Council is doing the same thing over and over and over and are happy with the results that we've gotten. Either of those are sad places for us to be. I would end, Madam Presiding Officer, by stating emphatically that Tobago is ready for greater development, for greater economic freedom, to actively be a part of all of the decisions that are made about us. Tobago is ready, Madam Presiding Officer, for participatory democracy. And we can, if we pass this motion as originally proposed, and then swiftly act on it, start to give Tobago all that it deserves. Madam Presiding Officer, I thank you.
Member for Palatuvia, Lansumi, Speyside.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. I wish to begin by asking us to consider a question. And the question is, how do we define Tobago in the nation context of Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm asking that question because at the heart of this motion and every other motion we discuss is really about how we see ourselves and how we define ourselves. And that question is even more relevant on a day like today when the Councillor Secretary for Tourism, Transportation and Culture will stand and amend the motion and will wish to water it down to the point that we don't acknowledge the realities in the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago. And I wish to start there. I wish to start there because our reality is, this is not an opinion, but it is a reality. Our reality is that in this nation context called Trinidad and Tobago, the larger Trini culture oftentimes subsumes the smaller Tobago culture. Our reality is, Madam Presiding Officer, that the larger Trini culture is often used to define Trinidad and Tobago. And unfortunately so. So when we water down the second tenet of the motion. Whereas the development of these cultural expressions is also critical for maintaining the identity of Tobago within the context of a sometimes complementary national culture and at other times a competing larger Trini culture, it says to me that leaders in this house are unwilling to acknowledge the reality that we are in competition with a larger Trini culture. That is a reality. And so at the heart of this motion is also to look at how within the context of a larger Trini culture, and we are not unique with this problem. If we go to St. Kitts Nevis, Antigua Barbuda, and if you go to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, you will find that smaller territories struggle to keep their identity and have it recognized as part of the national culture. So I don't understand why we are seemingly bashful about acknowledging that reality. Because if we acknowledge that reality, it perhaps might prompt us to act differently and might prompt us to act with a sense of urgency. In preparation for this motion, I sought to speak with some stakeholders within the sector. In fact, I tried to look for some senior, some elderly folks within the carnival industry so that maybe they could share with me some anecdotes about Tobago Carnival and the genesis of Tobago Carnival. And I wish to share some of those anecdotes with this house because I think it is important for understanding the necessity of this motion. I was told that organized carnival in Tobago is as a result of some Tobagonians who are going to Trinidad to play mass and on the return, sea rough, the boat end as smooth as what we have. In fact, the boat perhaps is as rough as the galleon's passage. People vomit down the place and sick and all kind of thing. And they decided, instead of us just going down to Trinidad, let me organize our carnival properly. I was told, anecdotally, that members of that first carnival committee would include Sardina, C.P. Roberts, Henry Brown Betty Smith, George Leacock Sr., and the person who gave information, recall that Sardina was the chairman of the committee, Leacock, the secretary, and Smith, the treasurer. And so they began to organize because they felt that there was a need. And Tobagonians have always been autonomous in their thinking and in our thinking. It's not new. So instead of going down to Trinidad, let us organize ourselves properly in Tobago. And then the more elders I spoke to, I hear about Calypso tents in the 1920s and 30s. I was reminded about Shadow and how he would have recorded some of Tobago's carnival history in his songs, like his seminal Pak Pak, which reminds us of what carnival was like in Tobago, and him coming from Culloden and so on. I also heard the anecdotes of people like Abyssinia and the devil portrayals that happen on the island. And I was reminded that there have been times in Tobago's history when our carnival was heavily subscribed to, when the carnival product was superior, when participation was great, and that what we might be experiencing is natural fluctuation, downturn, people get bored, people want something new, and hence the necessity of this motion is needed because there's a need for us to reinvent our carnival. And now I am positing this on the table as a man from the church and as a seasonal camper. In fact, just last week, I was in the constituency of my goodly friend, member for Black Rock, Wim Spring Garden. And I told the church, I said, invite your area rep. Let him come and hear the word of God. But I didn't see him. So I assume he was perhaps busy. Because I'm sure the good folks would have given him my invitation. You didn't get it? Okay, well, I'll take it up with the church board then. Right. But even as someone from within the bowels of the church, I wish to strongly posit that there is a need for us to reinvent the carnival as we have it. And I see people, in fact, the councillor, Secretary for Tourism, Culture and Transportation, made the point that it's because of our moral bearings now, because of the rise of the church, because of charismatic religions, and I'm paraphrasing, why we have seen a downturn in terms of participation at carnival activities. Now, I don't know, and I'm paraphrasing, she's linking that there may be a possibility to those things. And I'm saying the converse is also happening. Because I could tell you that there are folks I raised in camp that I have been camping with, that I have been carrying to camp as almost babies. And when I WhatsApp them now, when I call them now, and I say, let me go camp now, they say, nah, boy, I go in Juve. Wow. So the converse is also happening. We are all competing for the same space. We are all competing for the same cultural space. And so one of the things that we may need to do, and that we have to do, is to become more innovative. Now, I understand, I would have understood the Secretary for Tourism if she had altered the first resolution to say that the THA should continue to allow communities to host carnival activities, that host carnival activities to find ways to reinvent the Tobago Carnival. But we can't behave as if it's blanket across the board, that all communities have been doing it, and that has been in the majority. Kudos to Collar Hall and Crown Point. Conversely, we are seeing some decline in Roxborough. And then when you look at Scarborough, you wonder whether we should actually keep Juve in Scarborough at all, given the numbers. And if the Secretary, looking at what happened in Scarborough, for example, cannot look at that and see that has been extremely poor participation, then I have to stand there and question sanity of some members. Sure. Beyond that, I was also informed that Carnival is a lot more spiritual than you think. And I said to the person, I said, but how can Carnival be spiritual? Because in my world, Carnival is as secular as it gets, and as far removed from spirituality as it gets. That's my world. However, the person pointed out to me, the person said, look, have you observed that the vast majority of our mass makers tend to be Roman Catholics or spiritual shouter Baptists? And I said, well, I never really give it any thought. He said, go ahead, give it some thought. Start thinking of the mass band makers that you know. Start thinking of their religious persuasion. And you will see that even mass makers, they may just simply have a different sense and definition of spirituality to yours, Farley. That's what I was told. And so, in our discussion, we have to recognize that although Tobago is a small space, there is sufficient space for us to do multiple things and do multiple things well. I wish to go a bit into carnival economics. And I looked at a report done by Keith Nurse, and that name should be familiar to many in the house. Keith Nurse is a senior fellow at Salisis, and Salisis is the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies at the University of the West Indies. And in a 2017 report, he looked at the years 2008 to 2017. And in it, and I'm quoting Keith Nurse now, he says, carnival arrivals continue to be a key driver of tourism and creative industries expansion. Tourist arrivals for the carnival consistently account for over 12% of total annual arrivals and visitor expenditure for the 3-week period. A large share of repeat visits from diaspora, regional and cultural tourists drives this impressive economic performance, end of quote. So in other words, Carnival for Trinidad and Tobago as a whole, and in particular for Trinidad, is a key driver for our tourism sector. In fact, it accounts for the peak in arrivals in any year. And if Carnival arrivals low, tell yourself arrivals for that year going to be low. Because the peak arrivals to Trinidad, according to Nurse and his study, using CSO statistics, is that Carnival is our peak for tourist arrivals. He also highlighted an important point, which is the role that our diasporic community plays in sustaining the Carnival industry. And I have had cause, Madam Presiding Officer, to buff many people who see Carnival as just a waste of time, because there are few industries in the country that grow as quickly and grow as well as the Carnival industry. That is a reality. The Carnival industry is also one of our most productive industries in terms of performance in the entire country. In fact, in some years, Carnival grows by at least 4% annually in most years. And so let's think of what other industry grows so well in the country. And we will realize that Carnival is not a waste of time as far as the economics is concerned. And that's something we have to consider when we are considering whether or not we should have a second Carnival, and whether or not we should reinvent the Carnival that we have. Because it stands to reason, if Trinidad and other Caribbean territories can make money from Carnival, there might just be something there that we could get. We could perhaps get a piece of the pie. Additionally, in 2017 figures, and this is CSO's figures, estimated total visitor expenditure for Carnival in 2017 was at US $50 million. It was down $1 million from the year before 2016. This is according to CSO statistics. And think about that for a second. 50 million spent by visitors in the space of just 3 weeks. And Madam Presiding Officer, every year the cost of costumes keep rising exponentially. The cost of the fetes keep going up. And somehow people are still able to afford them. And somehow the auntie and the uncles from the US could still fly in and pay for their costume and pay for their season passes and go to fete after fete. So there is economic benefits to having the Carnival if it's done well. But in terms of job creation, and I want us to look indirectly at job creation. Carnival, in my estimation, indirectly creates thousands of jobs. And most of these jobs are in the ancillary industries. We're talking about things like telecommunications. People come, they need cell phones, they need SIM card, they need phone cards, they need to call people, they need data, they need to be able to post on Instagram and WhatsApp and Twitter and Facebook their experience while they're here. So telecom industry benefits. We have ground transportation, auto rentals, catering, tour operations. Then you will have the unlikely, we don't think about often, but things like the book publishing and advertising, then handicraft sales. Because when tourists come to a place, one of the things that they look at is what can I take back that can represent the fact that I was there. I accomplished this. I connected with people in a strange place. And handicraft fits that. And of course, the clothing industry profits. Because people need to dress and look their best. People need to look like zessas, they say, in order to make it to the Carnival fetes. And so we have all of these industries benefiting from having a Carnival. I reached out to a Carnival expert, Dr. Kai Barrett, who is a PhD in cultural studies from the University of the West Indies, but is a lecturer with UTech in Jamaica, University of Technology in Jamaica. And I reached out to her and I asked her a simple question. The question was, how many Trinidad-styled carnivals or Trinidad-led carnivals are there globally. And she said at her last count, it was 60. So think about this. Carnival is not just good for business internally, but carnival is also good for export. It's something that we too can export. And Councillor Dr. B. Israel spoke about the possibility of marrying our traditional folklore characters with our carnival and creating new characters that are Tobago-centric and Tobago-owned and Tobago-indigenous. And I'm saying, who is to say that in creation of these, that we can't be looking at exporting these characters to other carnivals around the region and around the world? The same way mud is being exported in a plastic bag. I will never think that the day will come when we'll be exporting dirt. Taking dirty and coloring it and exporting it out for other people around the world to use. So there is an industry that can be gained from having both a second carnival and reinventing the pre-Lenten carnival. We perhaps should look at the example of Jamaica. And I'm using the Jamaican example because it's the one I am most intimate with. When I was at the university campus to make costumes, when we come home for Christmas, we will fill our suitcases with all the beads and feathers we could find from Samaroos, and they will often be squashed between with tins of corned beef and with cheese and with seasoning and pepper sauce and with powdered milk, because Jamaica doesn't sell powdered milk. And we will squash them up and we will carry them back to Jamaica, create these costumes that we think were fantastic. But when I look back at the pictures recently, I said these things were real cheap and cheaply looking. And we will carry them back and we will create the band and organize through the Trinidad and Tobago Students Association to have the band and so on the campus and have the carnival. I left the campus in 2000, yes, mass band. I wouldn't say I'm a mass man, but I tried my best as a student leader, because one of the principles of the church is render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And I left the campus actively in 2009, but I have been back every year except for last year. And when I go back and I look at what carnival in Jamaica has become since the days when it first arrived in Jamaica, Jamaicans saw carnival at one point as an uptown thing for the rich people, the brown-skinned people in Jamaica, the people who live in the expensive region. And I watch how their festival has developed into a massive money-making enterprise. I ask myself, why can't we? We closer to anything carnival than Jamaica. The one caveat, though, is that I have seen in Jamaica photographers coming from Trinidad, models for band launch coming from Trinidad, costumes being created and designed by Trinidadians. So practically Trinidadians managing the whole industry out there. Of course, the musicians from Trinidad. And I wouldn't want that to necessarily be our story, because our story should be we reinvented our carnival, that we can become the truest alternative and the best alternative to carnival in Port of Spain. And then we look at the feasibility of a second carnival that can earn money for the local Tobago industry people, as opposed to everything necessarily coming from Trinidad. And that's a careful consideration that must also be made. We must also, Madam Presiding Officer, acknowledge the fact, and I see what the Councillor Secretary for Tourism would have cleverly tried to do. Amend the motion so that the blame for why we are still here doesn't rest squarely on the shoulders of her party. Here we are in 2019, 10 years after a 2009 report that recommended some of the same things we are recommending today. And we are still being told this thing will take some time to develop. And I wonder why it is we are not being told, I am sorry for it taking so long. Because between 2009 to 2019, if my memory serves me correct, we practically had this, not practically, we had and still have the same political party governing the island. And so continuity and transition and all of these things should not be an issue. And by the time Gypsy came on the scene in 2012, 2009 was already a distant memory. And so one must ask the question now, why was it the answer a flat-out no in 2012? And what is so wrong if the motion says that we are going to revisit that 2012 Executive Council decision? That's a fact. Unless we are saying that it wasn't the Executive Council who took the decision in 2012, and the former Chief Secretary, Mr. London, on his own accord just said no, and that was that. That is a fact, acknowledged by this motion. And so to amend it is to try to water it down and remove the blame from where the blame is supposed to be placed, and to make it look as if, you know, we're now trying a thing. More than that, Madam Presiding Officer, I don't understand why we are afraid to have motions that are time-bounded. Now, I will appreciate if the Secretary said to us, 6 months is too short, we'll amend it and we will say a year, we'll amend it and say a year and a half, but to amend it and not put any time bounds at all, it means that this 4-year term will expire and next one will start and we will still be discussing the same thing. Smart goals require that we put time on these goals. And so we should have a time attached to how long it will take us, rather, to have this assessment done. The Secretary for Tourism also spoke about, and you know, sometimes Google is our best friend. And in raising the potential conflict between the church and the state in this secular festival, we should have looked back to see where the genesis of that might have come from. And if we go to a Guardian report of Friday, March 9th, 2012, and we were in the midst of the back and forth, because as far as people were concerned, Kamla and them trying to come and impose themselves on Tobago, they're disrespecting us, they're breaking all protocol, and it's just ironic, and I must mention, it's just ironic that that was our stance in 2012. But in 2019, 2018, 2019, Stuart Young and others could do worse, and we are silent, and we are okay with it. Notwithstanding, that article heading is, London urges Paris to speak out on second Tobago Carnival. And in the newspaper report, and I'm quoting, Tobago House of Assembly Chief Secretary Orville London yesterday called on the Pentecostal assemblies of the West Indies Tobago district to express its view on the staging of a second carnival on the island, which is not bad. But then he said the church had a role to play in the specific development issues with moral and ethical overtones, and had remained silent for too long on too many things. Everything is your business, and you will find that in a number of developed countries, the church makes statements. There are things that you don't like, so if you don't like it, say it. There is also all this talk in Tobago about a second carnival. What is the view of the church on that? What are you all saying about it? Now, this sounds like the Chief Secretary, from the tone of it, was inciting the churches to help him raise an objection to having a second Tobago Carnival, because it was politically fitting at that time so to do. And so the motion rightfully acknowledges that in 2012 there was an Executive Council decision. In fact, if you go on the website of the THA, you will still find articles posted there about this matter, to not have a second carnival. And so the second motion is perfect as it is. The second resolution, sorry, is perfect as it is. The first resolution is also perfect as it is, and I will give way if those on the other side wish to add the word continue, since the Secretary is saying that it has already started with the engaging of communities to reinvent the carnival. And finally, Madam Presiding Officer, it would be remiss of me not to touch a bit on the issue of camping. My colleague mentioned it, but I want to go a little more in depth, because this carnival thing, to me, is more than just the parade, is more than just what happens on the street, is more than just what happens in the fete. It's a much larger industry than that. And the church, I believe, will be hypocritical to say it doesn't want any carnival at all when we are all too happy to have the carnival time off to go to camp. If the church is saying no carnival period, then church people, instead of going to camp, should come to work. Let's be real. Instead of going to camp, should come to work, because we are saying no carnival. But we can't, on one hand, want them to have a carnival, so we go have time over here, and then on the other hand say, don't have none at all. Let's be real. I mean, give the people what the people want. It has nothing to do. God has never asked any of us to force anybody to follow his dictates or to follow the dictates of any particular church. It's always about free will. It's always about freedom of choice. And even in this coming weekend, as we celebrate religious liberty, we are reminded that that freedom of choice exists. And while I am not a carnival person, and you wouldn't see me winding down low in Juve, in Roxborough, I believe it is the right of people, if they want to do so, to do so. Right. It is also my right to go to camp. It's also my right to preach against carnival. It's my right to encourage my young people to come to camp, and it is their right, if they want to go otherwise, so to do. That is the basis of a democracy. But this year, I recognize that we have a shortfall in terms of accommodation for camp. People were randomly calling my constituency office asking for help to find venues for camping. And I'm saying, but this is not the role of a constituency office to look for a community center for you to camp or to look for a field for you to camp. I mean, just look for where you want to camp and find it. You know, I mean, people from Trinidad, I don't even know where they get a number, but they're calling. And a couple of times I had to put them on to community development, put them on to this person. And it hit me that where are our hostels that can accommodate that kind of activity? And not just that kind of activity. When we have sport meets like the Falcon Games that is coming, then people are also looking for cheap accommodation that they could bring their backpacks and in a more casual environment that they could stay in. And so one of the things I want us to look at, even as we are looking at Carnival, is to not forget to look at the campers. Because I see it as part of the Carnival industry that is worthwhile. There is money to be made from that as well. And as the motion said, this is not a motion saying that we have to have a second Carnival. This is saying that we should do the proper assessment. And if the 2009 report, is still valid and still has merit, then let's use that as the assessment in moving forward. This motion doesn't say that we have to reinvent the carnival in one way versus the other. It says that we must encourage our communities so to do. We must engage our communities so to do. And
member, the speaking time is up.
I request that the speaking time of the member be extended by a further 10 minutes.
Members, the question is that the speaking time for the member be extended by a further 10 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Member, your speaking time has been extended.
Thank you very much. It's a good thing I didn't promise brevity today. So no one can say that I reneged on my promise. But being a man of the church, a promise is a covenant you must keep. But, yes, Madam President, as I was saying in wrapping up, this is for us to really sit and take a hard look at what we have. We can have a much better pre-Lenten carnival, and we can potentially have a big money-making second carnival. We could potentially have the best alternative to carnival in Port of Spain, so that people don't think if they need a slower time, they must go to San Fernando or Princestown. They must think, I must come to Tobago. We could have potentially a second carnival that may even facilitate those bands from Trinidad doing their band launches at that time of the year, that facilitates the creativity of our people, and that will give our local soca artists a chance. And that's something we have to remember. During the pre-Lenten carnival, our local artists must compete with everybody else in Trinidad who have access to radio, television, proper studio, everything. We have to compete with them. But if we have a second carnival, it may be a possibility that a hit song could really make a hit from our second carnival and make its way all the way down towards the next cycle of Trinidad pre-Lenten carnival. All of these are things to be considered. I concede that in our discussion, we have to dialogue with more than just the stakeholders who are intimate to carnival. We must also dialogue with the public at large. So I concede that point, but I see no real reason for us to amend the motion, to water it down, so that we won't have to acknowledge the fact that our indigenous culture is competing for a space on the national platform, to water it down to the fact that we fail to acknowledge the reality that previously we said no to a second carnival, and now we are going to reassess it. And finally, there's no need to amend the motion to water it down to the point where we don't acknowledge that too many of our communities and carnival committees have not been engaged in reinventing the carnival as we know it. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Chief Secretary and Secretary of Education, Innovation and Energy.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, it is a pleasure to rise today to contribute to the motion presented by the minority, but that has been amended by the majority. And it is interesting that the minority leader, who professes to be a man who is a Democrat, as soon as the Chief Secretary gets up to speak in response to his motion, he has departed the chamber. I think it is very, very significant. I would have sat here, Madam Presiding Officer, and I would have listened to all the speakers, because I know that as one participating in the debate, at least common courtesy and decency would suggest that one hears what is being said so that one can contribute in a meaningful way and, if necessary, to respond to some of the concerns. Let me begin by addressing, Madam Presiding Officer, the concerns of the minority in respect of the amendment of the motion. And I don't understand the lament, because the motion was amended simply because in our reading of the motion, it was clear to us that the spirit and intendment of the motion was really to create a series of conversations, a dialogue as it were, in an attempt to see whether the time is not now right for us to treat with the whole issue of a second carnival to Tobago. In addition to which, there were some flawed premises and some misconceptions. For example, the motion if I were to take paragraph 4, and whereas over the years, participation in some of the island's carnival celebrations has arguably been extremely poor. I don't know which years, Madam Presiding Officer, that this motion speaks to, because the truth be told, over the last 2 to 3 years, the records do not at all suggest that there has been a decrease in the participation rate of persons involved in the carnival. And I'm looking for my statistics, because the statistics will show an increased participation rate in many of the areas. For example, in Scarborough, the Old Mass bands increased from 2 in 2018 to 6 in 2019. There was also a welcome return to persons registering for Old Mass as individuals. That's the fact. That's statistics. The Côte d'Or Juve organizers have also reported all-round increases, but have complained about the number of revelers who were just interested in jumping behind a music truck with no costume of any kind. And these are some of the things we have to consider. Why is it that some of our people just like freeness? You know, as a matter of fact, band leaders who produce costume bands complain bitterly about the unwillingness of those persons who express an interest in playing mass, but that unwillingness to pay for costumes. Even the mud mass that you spoke glowingly about, the truth be told, if you really examine the mud mass over the last 2 years, what you will see is that whilst the numbers have grown, persons hardly have mud. They don't even want to pay $20 to get mud. And it's serious, because even as you seek to talk about innovation and reinventing, one has to get to the core of these issues. Isn't it as simple as that? Many times, we look and we listen. I heard you talk about, made reference to Trinidad, and you know that there are band launches in Trinidad months before Carnival season. I can't tell the last time I heard of a band launch in Tobago. Also, there are band parties at the end. There is a reluctance, generally, of persons in Tobago to be involved in mass. Some of them don't want to pay, and that is the reality. Now, you spoke about people's right to do what they should do, participate or not participate. It's people's right to participate in carnival activities. It is their right not to participate if they so desire. That is the reality. That's some of the things we have to treat with. I was particularly disappointed because we saw this motion as being non-contentious, basically. Because the motion calls for us to take a look at whether the time has come for a second carnival. And it was on that basis that we approached the conversation. But there are times listening to you on the other side, through you, Madam Presiding Officer, I got the impression that the contribution suggested that we were against the consultation, or the approach suggested. We're not. We're not. And it was heartrending, really, to sit here and listen to the lamentation of the minority councillor, all in the name of the people, when in truth and in fact, the minority leader was really expressing a sense of her own frustration. And I consider it particularly disingenuous with what was happening. I would like to talk about participatory democracy. We did not object. Councillor Nadine did not object to the approach. So where did that come from? And as far as I'm concerned, participatory democracy doesn't mean that all issues of governance and government must be discussed by everybody. Because I'm sure that you are aware that democracy in its purest form would have been valid years ago, particularly in communities that were small and where it was physically possible for the citizenry to meet together to discuss issues of governance in those days that were relatively simple. We have evolved to what you call indirect democracy, where a few are given a social contract for a period of time to run the affairs of the state. It doesn't mean, of course, that you will not engage the population on particular issues at particular time. And you know what was disingenuous again? Because reference was made to the approach that we have decided to take in respect of the autonomy issue. And I remember that prior to my administration, there were countless meetings all over Tobago on the autonomy issue. And yet when I invited the minority side to be part of a conversation, the minority councillor described 4 years of consultation all over Tobago as a sham. One of the things that we must recognize that in a democracy, ideas must contend. And somebody may not like your ideas. The majority may not like your ideas. And if that's the case, that's the case. It may be one of the vagaries of democracy, but such it is. So the fact that one may make a suggestion and is not carried does not necessarily mean that the consultation was poor or bad. It may signal that one is a poor loser, if anything else. So that as much as they leave the chamber, they like to give jamming, but they can't take. But I congratulate you, the member for Speyside. You seem to have more in you than your colleagues. Now, you did make the point about your lack of appreciation for the amendment or the deletion of the paragraph that dealt with the first resolution. But in addition to that, you also made reference to the amendment, I think, of the second paragraph, whereas, and felt that because the words competing came out, the motion has been watered down. I submit it is not. Because what we have proposed captures the essence of the motion. Indeed, as you are very well aware, all cultures contend. As a matter of fact, what we have today, in some instances, represents a legacy of some sort of some of the African culture. Not everything. Syncretism is a natural phenomenon when it comes to culture and cultures clashing. But I say to you, without fear of contradiction, that we have been able in Tobago to preserve a distinctive culture in very, very many ways. So that the fact that we took that out is not an indication that one does not appreciate the nature of syncretism. We do. We do. But the simple fact of the matter is, it is within the context of the national culture, which is what we have. So we have not watered down the motion. We got to the core of the issues. And that is what we are about. The arguments that you would have presented relating to the economics of the emotion, we are not averse to those. As a matter of fact, the point was made by my colleague that if we are to move to a second carnival, then clearly there are some issues that we must pay attention to. Because clearly what we don't want is a replication of what happens in the pre-Lenten season. It must be a product that is consciously and explicitly constructed so as to generate particular outcomes. That's what we say. And we also say that those outcomes ought in the main to be a set of outcomes that can contribute to the economic development of the island. So we're not apart, so to speak, in respect of the economics. And I would just want to suggest to you that in addition to some of what you would have mentioned, that we would also want to place on record the fact that arising out of any second carnival must be that the developmental opportunities to our people in Tobago, as well as those in the various communities, must be paramount. One of the things we wouldn't want at all, as seemed to have been the case in the Tobago Fest, is the situation where we had a Tobago Fest, but most of the providers of the goods and services were from outside of Tobago, because those who would have organized it would have organized it on the basis that they had the resources. And I don't know, because you would have confessed that for most of the carnival season, except Jamaica, you had camp. So I don't know if you're aware that the first year of the Tobago Fest, there was relative success. But after that, it degenerated to the point where it was like a block hole with multiple fights and so on. And that was the prime reason that it was stopped. What was suggested in terms of the benefits were never realized. Never realized. As a matter of fact, it was felt that we'll see the value of costumes and there would be technology transfer and that kind of stuff. It never did happen. And that is why if we go in this route of a second carnival, we must make sure that all the elements associated with the product, whatever we come up with, must be those that can contribute to the development of the island in ways that our artisans, our creative persons, and so on can benefit and can reap the rewards. And let me make the point very forcefully that we are not averse, really, to innovation and creativity. I'll share this with you. There was a time, and you spoke to the history of the carnival, and you spoke to some of the, as you say, the anecdotal experiences that you got, where in the absence of music trucks and DJs and so on, it was the steel band. Steel band ruled the roost. But like everything else, things evolved, and now you have music trucks. But more than that, an attempt was made, if you want to call it, to recreate. Yes? And to get the steel bands back on the road on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. I don't know if you recall, I had to intervene in order to moderate or mediate that situation. Thank you. To get the bands back on the road. But you know what happened this year? They were not there. Steel bandsmen were given the choice. And they decided that it was either senior panorama and junior panorama, or senior panorama and pans on the road. And in their letter, because there's a letter, I happened to see that letter, that went to the Festival Commission, that their decision was steel band, panorama, and junior panorama. I say that not to criticize the steel bandmen, but to demonstrate to you that that was participatory democracy. Because we consulted with them, and that is the way they said they wanted to go. So even as we tried last year to reinvent or to recreate. You saw what happened this year. And that's part of the challenge that we have to treat with. How do you get persons to change their mental frames, their mindsets, and to become innovative and creative, rather than to hold on to what they think is the best thing for them? Your minority leader, in making his contribution, did say something about not fighting with Chuko. For the records, let me say that this administration had no fight with Chuko. This administration was insisting on accountability, because I don't know if you know that for years, Chuko had not produced any audited accounts or any accounts whatsoever for the funds they would have been receiving from the THA. And that demand was made on Chuko this year. More than that, I am aware that attempts were made to meet with Chuko on several occasions. All those attempts were frustrated. As a matter of fact, I would have instructed the Secretary of Tourism to use the office to summon an emergency meeting with the chairman of Tobago. That attempt bore no fruit. Because you know what? We felt that as part of, to use your phrase, reinventing some of the aspects of our carnival, that more opportunities should be given to Calypsonians in terms of new or budding Calypsonians coming on stream, as well as those persons interested in soca. Because you made the point in your contribution about our soca persons have to compete in Trinidad. But we also organize competition here for them. And this year we wanted to deepen that process. It didn't work out. So that what you had this year was the Festivals Commission having to take the responsibility to run and manage Calypso tents. And I could tell you, the 2 tents that were under the jurisdiction of the commission had a total of about 40 Calypsonians. So that one of the issues really has to do with misinformation. And that is why I'm taking the opportunity to correct the record. Any attempt to have a second carnival must result in the creation of a new and signature event. I am sure those of you on the minority side would appreciate that. Because what you would want is to have an activity that can be branded in a particular way and that can be used to attract visitors to the island. It must be distinctive, and of course, it would be rooted in the cultural norms of the island, for which we have a rich heritage. You made the point that whereas Carnival seemed to have been exported to many countries, the Trinidad model, in your familiarity with Jamaica, there were perhaps more Trinidadian entrepreneurs and businessmen than Jamaicans. And therefore, even as you're saying that there's a possibility to export Carnival, you placed a caveat, eh? And I'm saying that's the challenge we have in forging our own. Because we have to, on the one hand, seek to organize and mobilize the resources in a way that would allow us to define and create this product. But on the other hand, we have to protect it in such a way so that those persons who should benefit from it, our local persons, can indeed benefit. That's the challenge. And that is why we are not averse to a conversation that would allow all stakeholders, not limited to any one group or two groups, to be part of the process. And the absence of a time frame in no way, in absolutely no way, undermines the seriousness with which we are prepared to take this on board. As a matter of fact, even before you table this motion, I had already given the Secretary for Tourism the instruction to meet with Tobago and look towards organizing a pan festival, a local pan festival in Tobago sometime in September. Why? Simply because as a national instrument, more particularly an indigenous instrument, there is very little activity for pan and pan enthusiasts outside of the carnival season. And I'm old enough to remember the days when we had festivals, pan festivals, where pans or steel bands were expected to play two songs, a tune of choice and another one. And I remember the year when Cats and Jammers of Blackrock won Best Tune of Choice with Funiculi Funicular. At one time, Cats and Jammers was known as a festival band because they had become exponents in the art. And I'm saying that all of that are things that we can bring back. The challenge, however, is that if it is not THA initiated, it doesn't happen. We would really like to have a situation where there is greater investment by the private sector. And in this regard, any second carnival must take on board the whole issue of funding and the role of private sector in facilitating and fashioning that kind of activity. Now, you made the point, the Secretary also made the point, that at the end of the day, we may never call it carnival per se because of the connotation. We may find a label, a name, a nomenclature that in fact reflects something indigenous to Tobago and that is wrapped within and around our various cultural norms and artifacts as well as expressions. So we, on this side, are comfortable with the process of exploring it. And that is why when we amended the motion, we talk about propitious, because we are saying perhaps the time is now. So that I would suggest to those of you on that side that you don't see the amendment as something frivolous or an attempt to water down the motion. And rather, as your minority leader had said earlier today, even before he began his presentation, about magnanimity on this side, perhaps that side needs to demonstrate the level of magnanimity that is required at this time. So we're not here to fight. As a matter of fact, if I were in a more combative mood this afternoon, I might have been responding to the laments and the mismatch of irrelevance and disingenuity that would have characterized certain presentations. But that's not my forte, at least not today, because this motion essentially can easily be a bipartisan motion, because we are saying on this side, as was said in part by some of you on that side, that we need to consider the real possibility of a second carnival, if only to ensure that we make use of the skill sets that we have in Tobago, and at the same time seek to exploit the economic benefits in the main, particularly as those benefits can relate to the earnings of foreign exchange. Such a venture ought to at least as well provide opportunities to develop the mass production capacity of the Tobago mass entrepreneurs, and to support continuous improvement in the artistry and the quality of mass. And quite frankly, I would have been around last year, and I witnessed some of the mass presentations, especially on the night of the King and Queens of the Bands, and also on this year. And I think that this year represented an improvement in the quality of most of the presentations. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that one of our veteran mass players and band leaders, who would have indicated that she has been playing mass for over 30 years, is reported to have said, "Leave Tobago Carnival alone." Band of the Year winner says, "Bigger isn't better." And this is a Kenesha George Harry article. A veteran Tobago band leader has added her voice to the debate over the practicality of changing the date for Carnival to be celebrated on the island or staging a second Carnival later in the year. Candice Sandy, who won the 2019 overall Band of the Year title with her presentation, Kaleidoscope, blah, blah. Been involved in Carnival for the past 30 years plus, because I grew up in this. I don't see these people anywhere around Carnival. Most of them spend their Carnival in Trinidad. In other words, she's making the point that many of those who are calling for a second Carnival do not ever stay in Tobago during that period of time. Now, one of the issues as well that we'll have to consider has to do with the possible impact on our school calendar. Because clearly, if we're going to do a second Carnival, the issue of when becomes into question. And if we're talking about later down in the calendar year, we'll have to ask ourselves, how can this impact the school children who, as you know, take part in the pre-Lenten Carnival? As a matter of fact, we have junior calypsonians, we have junior mass players, we have junior steel bands. And therefore, you'll have to ask yourself whether, if you go in for a second Carnival, in the definition of your product, whether you have to limit and restrict some of the activities. But these are considerations, these are some of the questions we'll have to grapple with. And as you know, Carnival is typically a season. Should we have another season, or should it be limited to 3 or 4 or 5 days?
Member, your speaking time is up.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I wish to move that the speaking time of the honourable member be extended by a further 10 minutes.
Members, the question is that the speaking time for the honourable member be extended by a further 10 minutes. All in favour?
Aye.
Any against? Member, your speaking time has been extended by a further 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. It's a good thing I didn't say I was going to be short. So that one of the things that I need to emphasize, I did mention earlier that we're not averse to doing things differently and, in fact, being innovative and seeking to provide opportunities for our people in Tobago to benefit from. We would have just had a wonderful activity. We just hosted the 4th biannual Pan American Dragon Boat Competition Festival in Tobago. And it's a pity, the member for Speyside, that you were not there. You were there any of the days? It's a pity. It was a wonderful experience. You and all would have been proud. And you would have been proud of the administration for being able to pull that off. May I inform you and your colleagues, this Honorable House and the rest of Tobago, that there were over 1,000 persons accredited. I think it might have been like about 1,100. Between 600 and 700 persons were foreigners. Canada, United States, Panama in the main. There was a small delegation, I think, from Puerto Rico. Such was the impact that in a conversation with a couple of the persons, especially those from Canada, those who didn't express their willingness to return, said to me, I have extended my stay. One from 7 days to 16 days. So we are doing things that can redound to the economic benefit of the island. And that's a niche, a sports niche that we have tapped into. So we are not averse at all. And once the conversation and whatever studies that we have to do indicate that there's a high probability of success, meaning that the venture can be viable, we are prepared to undertake the relevant activity, having regard to all those considerations which I've outlined, which of course include funding and so on, to bring this into reality. But we are saying, let's have the conversation. So we're not averse to that at all. And before I take my seat, and the minority leader must learn to behave himself, because he can't take the jamming, especially in this house. You see, he's comfortable outside of the house where he could ring his bell and march up and down. But because this house calls for a certain kind of decorum and behavior, he's so constrained that he can't manage his behavior at all. I could take the jammings, you know, so you make the noise there when I'm speaking, that's all right. But whenever anybody does it on this side, you object. Do so and like so. One of the things that one would learn when one gets into leadership position is that timing is important. And in many instances, sometimes an idea predates its execution by many years. Perhaps the time is now right for a serious consideration of a second carnival. The point was made, or it was attempted to be made, that those on this side do not take cognizance of some of the suggestions or ideas that are presented. Nothing could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, in coming into office, one of the things I said was, Tobago is too small to be managed along partisan lines, and that I am not averse to treating with talent wherever such talent exists. And in fact, there are persons who are not members of the PNM, or who may never have been sympathizers of the PNM, are now working with us because they recognize that notwithstanding the difference of political views, we have the common view of building Tobago. So I want that on record, and not because some persons may, in their own view, feel that they are sidelined. That is necessarily true of this administration. And therefore, Madam Presiding Officer, as I take my seat, let me reiterate our position on this side. That we have absolutely no difficulty in engaging a myriad of stakeholders in respect of whether it is desirable and or feasible for Tobago to have a second carnival. I thank you.
Minority Leader.
Madam Presiding Officer, the evening is fast spent. We started with a full gallery. It's now empty. And we understand why. Whenever a motion is raised by the minority council on this side, there are persons on that side who make it their business to tinker with it, to play with it, and then to give a half yes, we support. Do some never like so. But clearly I'm the leader here. Clearly, Madam Presiding Officer, I am the leader here. I set the trend, the others follow. When I walk out, the others walk out too. People, the statistics were given by the Chief Secretary stating that those persons who are asking for a second carnival go to Trinidad for carnival, the first carnival. We cannot validate those statistics. But if that is so, we are saying, and so what? That's the reason for a second carnival. If you miss news the first time, you press rewind and you watch it the second time. What is so wrong with that? Give people what they're asking for. And if the majority of people don't stick around for the first carnival in Tobago because it's lack innovation, it's lack participation in the early stages of the planning, etc., and execution, I don't see why. They're saying, give us something now that we can work upon, something that we can inject our funds in, and something that my interest is not divided over. In other words, when you have one channel, for those of us who live long enough, and it was TTT alone, it's either watch it or take off your TV. You have no cable to watch. You have no options. And so those who have that proclivity, that natural tendency to go to Trinidad for the first carnival, they are making a statement. They're saying, give us a second carnival. When we are least distracted by the savanna grass, when we are least distracted by the waterman, give us something in Tobago. And Tobago has created sufficient persons in the Calypso world, in the soca world, that says to the youths who have untapped talent that your day is coming up, your Tobago Carnival is coming up, when the center stage will be Tobago and Tobago alone. Even Trinidad will watch. And maybe someone who's scouting for talent may discover talent. This is why people are crying, give us a Tobago Carnival. My colleagues on that side, speaking with codes, want to give the public the impression that they support a second carnival. But they don't want to call it carnival. That's the kind of madness we're dealing with. Let me take back the word. That's the kind of childish rhetoric we're dealing with inside here. Childish rhetoric. Don't call it carnival, call it a different name. Carnival must be called carnival. We don't want no other name. Carnival is carnival. National carnival is national carnival. Then you have Tobago carnival. That's okay. Anybody who has been to the market, who has grassroots deals, will know that there is Chenet and there is Tobago Chenet in the market in Trinidad. There's avocado and Tobago avocado when you go in Trinidad. There's Julie Mango and Tobago Julie Mango. Tobago is a brand. Tobago is a brand, and it's time that the Secretary for Tourism start learning about Tobago. It's time she started learning about Tobago. I sat here in my chair and I almost catch a stroke when I heard the Secretary for Tourism revive a 10-year-old report, 2009. And she's speaking with such fluidity, such clarity. And yet, those plans that are in that report have remain largely untapped. She goes on to desecrate her very own department by saying people do not travel again to see white sand and what? Beaches. But isn't that what they are offering? What does Tobago has to offer again? What do we have to offer here again here? That's all they have given people. And the beaches now are eroding because of coastal erosion. So even the beaches will soon be gone. We are talking something serious here. We have carefully fashioned this motion using precise words to capture exactly what we mean. But as if she didn't read the motion properly, or the language was too sophisticated for her to understand, she have just deleted parts randomly in this hocus-pocus kind of way. It's very upsetting, Madam Presiding Officer. So, for ease of reference, and with the slowness of the tongue, I will go over again the motion that we have piloted here today. Whereas the development of Tobago's indigenous cultural expression, and I'll pause there for effect, Tobago's indigenous cultural expression is critical to the socio-economic development of our island. And whereas the development of these cultural expressions is also critical to the maintaining the identity of Tobago within the context of a sometimes complementary national culture, and at other times, a competing larger Trini culture. And whereas the annual pre-Lent National Carnival celebrations forms part of both our indigenous and national culture, and whereas over the years the participation in some of the island's carnival celebration has arguably been extremely poor, it is so. When you could hear, when, I want to get it right here, Madam President, I don't want to get it wrong, because even though I have parliamentary cover, or cover of the House, I want to show you the mismatch we have taking place here in Tobago. The Tobago Festival Executive Chairman, Mr. George Leacock, the chairman, of Tobago Festivals, executive chairman, Hear what he says on Facebook. So be careful what you post. March 2nd, 2009, 4 more days of pretending to like Carnival because everybody else doing it. Push, push, push. You can make it. This is why. This is why we have given these 2 resolutions. So nobody has to pretend they could make it and push, push, push. If the people are exposed and they're involved and are given the necessary resources, human, financial, etc., they will become animated and they will do it. Hence, the first resolution is placed in black and white. And I'll read it for her in case she missed it. Be it resolved that the Tobago House of Assembly allow because they have been debarring communities from being involved. Allow communities that host carnival activities to find ways to reinvent. That's the word. Reinvent the Tobago Carnival celebrations and to properly manage the budgeted resources for the festival so as to attract a larger participation. How are we talking about? They wipe it out completely. Instead, they want us to accept a motion by the Secretary of Finance, sit down with the Secretary of Community Development, sit down with the Secretary of Tourism, and they call that consultation. They have all the answers. They could reinvent Carnival. I sat in this house, Madam Presiding Officer, for 2 years, 2 months. And I've seen tourism fail. I've seen community remain underdeveloped. And I've seen finances spent badly. And they are taking 3 failed departments to put together to reinvent Carnival. It makes me say, ah. That's what it makes me say. We are of the view that if the community participate in apportioning the budgetary allocation assigned to it and say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, if they participate insofar as coming up with new ways of attracting people, they will be able to do it. They would be able to do it. I shudder in my boots. My boots. When I heard our Chief Secretary saying that they need something significant event to attract people. Where was our Chief Secretary, Madam Presiding Officer, for the last 2 years? Where was he? I am appalled that he wasn't the Chief Secretary. If we are going to boost Carnival, what we need is human beings to become involved. And Carnival must not be called any other name. There are already enough names in Tobago of festivals given by the THA. They have jazz, a multi-million-dollar failure. Up to now, we can't get back with money from who? D'Angelo. Multi-million-dollar failure. They call that event by name. Then there is Tobago Heritage Festival. At the end, which you have some kind of a carnival. Does that attract people? No, because the way they do it. The way they do it. What we are signaling here today is far more deep-rooted than just carnival. We are saying bring back participation within the communities. Allow people to have a say within the communities. Have real stakeholders meeting. And when you go to have a meeting, don't go there dry mouth. Carry a little juice, a little sugar cake, a little bread, a little something, a little sandwich. You go to have a meeting, dry mouth, and want people to come outside. Not in the UK. People do that. We went to UK, all of us, and the parliament, they tell you, when you go to have meeting with local government, within the communities, they have to have cake and juice. They said that to us as we went out there to listen to them. They want people to come on a dry mouth and talk to them for 5 hours, send them back home empty. People will not come with the ideas. We are saying, budget the money for the carnival, budget the money for the festival, and allow people to participate and monitor that money and to engage in making the thing worthwhile. The last resolve is that we consider a second carnival within the next 6 months. They wipe that out completely. They want no timeline. They want no timeline whatsoever. And anybody who studies without timeline is wasting time. They must study towards something. They must do a research towards something. You just can't be So you're compiling data and have no timeline. The idea is mind-boggling that they would want to engage in research without no definite timeline. We put 6 months. Why couldn't you agree to that? What's so hard about 6 months to agree? But that's my friends on the next side. They will understand that they too will have 6 months to go. And then they will try to put everything inside that last 6 months. We went on to say that they would meet with various stakeholders. We didn't limit it to say that those persons with the Tobago Fest. No, we said including those persons. But various stakeholders. The Chief Secretary is talking about inclusiveness and participation, and if THA don't take the initiative, nobody does. I want to put it on record here today, Madam Presiding Officer. It is the THA, the PNM-led THA, that have handicapped Tobago's businessmen and have destroyed the working class to a great extent. They put them on life support called CPEP, URP development, and up to now, their persons in agriculture cannot be paid. And look at my brother, who is responsible for agriculture, and he's driving nice. 5 Series, gas top right up, and there are people who cannot be paid for 3 fortnights. And he's swiveling in his chair as a child who just had ice cream. Swiveling in his chair. That's governance for you. That's governance. Unless the THA don't take initiative, you say it doesn't happen. We want to say today, if the THA wants the private sector to become involved, they must give the private sector the opportunity to, first of all, develop as a private sector by supporting them. You can support them by fixing the sea bridge. You can support them by adding an additional plane to the inter-island air transport. We know one of those places crashed, and it wasn't a MAX 8. It crashed on the ground. That's how ridiculous Caribbean Airlines has gotten to. The plane crashed on the ground. The nose breakaway. And they want to pretend it was a high wind that do it. Was no high wind. Careless driving. Driving the plane like if it was a bus. Bounce the nose of the plane. That plane is out of operation right now. Tobagoans are suffering on a daily basis to come to Tobago. And he didn't even address that issue. He, nor the Secretary for Transport, they did not address that issue at all. But there are big festivals coming up. Jazz festivals. Wasting money again. We on the minority side, we are saying Tobago has a rich culture. We have a unique culture. The way we talk is very different. We don't say little, we say little. We have our own unique culture. Something that the Jamaicans cherish. Something that the Bajans, right? The Bajan, they cherish. The Ghanaians cherish it. Everybody in the Caribbean cherish it. Except us in Tobago, they want to beat it out of us and laugh it out. But I'm a proud Tobagonian. And many of us are proud Tobagonians. The way the Tobagonians play the violin, that kind of a jig music for the old time, it's unique to Tobago alone. I have looked at a documentary, and these guys go over the world, and they play that special kind of music. Special type of music. These are things that we're supposed to export. Who say our carnival has to be like Trinidad Carnival? Why can't our carnival be different? Allow the people to develop things that are unique to them. And so I submit today, Madam Presiding Officer, that is this bill, we will not be submitting, we will not be accepting any form of amendment at all. None. And they must put an end to watering no motions on this side. I suggest that if they can't accept our motion, they reject the entire motion. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Members, The question to be put has had a number of amendments proposed. I would go through the amendments before I put the final question to the House. The first amendment deals with the second paragraph, or the first two paragraphs, where it is requested a deletion of sometimes complementary, from the second paragraph with the first and whereas. So there's a deletion requested for sometimes complementary, another deletion for culture, and at other times a competing larger Trini culture. And therefore, the requested new version of the amended section would be, and whereas the development of these cultural expressions is also critical for maintaining the identity of Tobago within the context of a national culture. All in favor of the deletions and amendment, say aye. Aye. Those against? Those abstaining? Anyone abstaining? Yes. Okay. That area is carried. And we go to the third paragraph where it says, and whereas the annual pre-Lent National Carnival celebrations forms part of both our indigenous and national culture, the S is removed from forms. To read, and whereas the annual pre-Lent National Carnival celebrations form part of both our indigenous and national culture. All in favor of the deletion and amendment? Aye. Any against? Any abstaining? Paragraph number 4 is asked to delete, over the years, participation in some of the island's carnival celebrations has arguably been extremely poor, and to instead insert, the time is now propitious to consider once again the idea of a second Tobago carnival. And so the amended version will read, and whereas the time is now propitious to consider once again the idea of a second carnival in Tobago. All in favor of the deletion, the insertion, and the new amendment, and the amended version, say aye. Aye. Any against? Those abstaining? Okay. The section on be it resolved, there is a request to delete the entire be it resolved. To delete that entire section. All in favor of deleting that entire section? Aye. Any against? Any abstaining? Okay. And so the last, be it further resolved, now becomes the be it resolved, where the request is okay. there is the last section where there are a number of requests in that section. So I was taking the time to reread the requests that were read out by the Secretary. It's quite extensive. So I think we will do the deletions first, we will then do the insertion, and then we will do the new, because it's quite a lot. So under be it further resolved, it is requested to delete the word further, to delete that the Tobago House of Assembly over the next 6 months rethink a formally held Executive Council decision that Tobago will not have a second carnival and will instead meet with various stakeholders, and to further delete, including those that now hold the Tobago Fest. All in favor of the deletions? Aye. All against? Those abstaining? And where you have deletions, to have insertions. 1, before the word stakeholders would be added that this House support a collaborative effort between the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation and the Division of Finance and the Economy to engage a wide cross-section of. The second insertion would come after the word stakeholders in the community of in the Tobago community. The third, between ascertain and feasibility, the word "the" will be added. Number 4, between feasibility and of a second carnival will be added. Number 5, after and, a "the" will be inserted. And number 6, after actions to be undertaken will be inserted. All in favor of the insertions? Aye. Any against? Any abstaining? Yes. Ayes have it, and therefore the amended paragraph for be it resolved would be it resolved that this House support a collaborative effort between the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation and the Division of Finance and the Economy to engage a wide cross-section of stakeholders in the Tobago community to ascertain the feasibility of a second carnival and the subsequent actions to be undertaken. All in favor of the amended? Any against? Those abstaining? Yes. Okay. I will proceed to put the question in its entirety to the honorable members at this time. Whereas the development of Tobago's indigenous cultural expressions is critical for the socio-economic development of the island, and whereas the development of these cultural expressions is also critical for maintaining the identity of Tobago within the context of a national culture, and whereas the annual pre-Lent National Carnival celebrations form part of both our indigenous and national culture, and whereas the time is now propitious to consider once again the idea of a second Tobago Carnival, be it resolved that this House support a collaborative effort between the Division of Tourism, Culture and Transportation and the Division of Finance and the Economy to engage a wide cross-section of stakeholders in the Tobago community to ascertain the feasibility of a second carnival and the subsequent actions to be taken. Members, the question has been put. All in favor? Aye. Any against? Any abstaining? The motion is now carried. Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I beg to move that this House now stand adjourned to a date to be fixed.
Members, the question put is that this House now stand adjourned for a date to be fixed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? This House now stand adjourned for a date to be fixed.